The last big set of theories are the reinforcement theories. We have one more we're going to talk about, which is goal setting, but reinforcement theories are one of the big three. They're not it's either needs or cognitive or reinforcement. And reinforcement theories are about the ways that we sustain behaviors. So what are we doing to sustain it, to repeat it, to make sure people will continue to do it, not just a one and done, but on a regular basis. So you're probably all familiar with operant conditioning, where you ring a bell and you get a reward, and that conditions us to learn, right? That every time a bell rings, I'm going to get fed. And so that becomes the reinforcement of a behavior, which is I anticipate eating and then I get fed. But operant conditioning is also about recognizing that I do something and I get a reward, so I want to continue to do that to get the reward again. Or I do something and I get punished, and so I want to avoid that punishment and not do it again. So we want to have positive consequences. When there's positive consequences, we will engage in a behavior. When there are negative consequences, we want to get rid of the behavior. So the goal is we want to continue the behaviors on an ongoing basis, whether it's avoiding something or engaging in something. And what we do know is positive reinforcement always works best, but we also have a lot of tools in the toolbox available for us, which we'll see on the next slide. There are four basic types of reinforcement theories. One is positive reinforcement. Another one is negative reinforcement. Then we have punishment, and we have extinction. And they work all on the same basic principle about the reward, whatever the outcome is and the behavior, but it's how they associate those outcomes and behaviors together that creates some subtle differences. Positive reinforcement basically is I learn to do something because every time I do it, I get a positive outcome and a positive reward. And that encourages me to repeat it because I got the positive outcome. Negative reinforcement is basically the same sort of idea, but I learn to do the things that you want me to do, and because there's a punishment that makes me remove the behavior that you don't want me to do. So if every time I reach to my left, I get a shock, I learn not to reach to my left. That's a negative reinforcement, right? So positive reinforcement is every time I sit still, I get a reward. Negative reinforcement is when I'm not sitting still and I'm moving my hand to the left, I get a shock that makes me put my hand next to me so I'm sitting still again. And that's the negative reinforcement. Punishment is when you engage in an undesirable behavior, I then give you an undesirable consequence. And so punishment is about I did something and I am now going to get a consequence for doing the thing. Extinction is where I just don't pay attention to it, I don't reward it, and the behavior then goes extinct. And this is a really important factor here, this notion of extinction. Punishment and negative reinforcement are getting at the same basic idea. But extinction is where I no longer reward a behavior, it's going to stop. So a lot of times you'll hear managers say, I shouldn't have to acknowledge or thank people for doing the job that they're getting paid to do. The pay should be enough. And it's like, yes, to a point, but people need to know that the behavior that they did is done well. And if you don't regularly tell them what they're doing right, they'll stop trying. They'll stop doing the behavior because there's no incentive to do it anymore. It's not a habit, and so people won't do it if they're not going to get a reward for it, or whatever the reward is, whether it's a thank you or a pay or whatever it might be. So extinction can happen when we just simply stop rewarding the behavior. And we think, oh, this is okay. Now they're doing it. I don't need to reward them anymore. But that backfires because then the behavior will go extinct because no one is going to be reinforcing it in the first place. This slide is just an example about how that basically works. And so when there is a stimulus present and the stimulus is pleasant, then that's positive reinforcement and increases my behavior. So getting praise from your supervisor is a great example of a positive reinforcement. I get praise, I continue the behavior. If I have the stimulus that is present and it is unpleasant, then it is considered punishment, and that decreases my behavior. So if I get criticism from my supervisor, then I make sure that I don't do the behavior so I don't get the criticism. If the stimulus that was there is gone now, and that stimulus was present, then that stimulus was pleasant, then the behavior will start to go extinct. It will decrease. So if I don't say thank you after a couple of weeks, and I stop saying thank you and I stop acknowledging that you did a good job, that puts people in limbo and they don't know, am I still doing a good job? So why should I continue to do this if it doesn't seem to matter? And I'll stop doing the behavior. If you have a stimulus that's removed and it was an unpleasant stimulus, so for example, let's say you were getting punished and now you are behaving the way they want, and we remove the punishment, that's what we call is negative reinforcement. So now I will continue to do the thing that you were punishing me for not doing. And so I'm avoiding, for example, future criticism from my boss, because you're not going to continue to criticize me if I do the thing that you want me to do. So punishment and negative reinforcement kind of work on the same way, but one is now and one is the perceptions for the future. So it's not enough to just do a reinforcement, whatever that is, a reward or a punishment, but you have to have different schedules result in different behaviors. So if you have continuous reinforcement, it means all the desired behaviors are reinforced. But what starts to happen after a while is the reward doesn't mean anything anymore because you're continually getting it. You expect it all the time, and it stops having meaning. It's like we stop getting the little squirt of juice. It doesn't matter anymore. I don't care. I'm not as excited about it anymore, and so I won't continue to do it. You're better off with what we call a partial reinforcement schedule. For example, a fixed interval, like every time you do X, every 2 weeks you'll get a paycheck. That is a fixed interval. So I know every 2 weeks I get paid, I get the paycheck, that's my motivation, and I'm good. Every month I know I get evaluated for pay performance. It's a fixed interval. Every month my bonus will change based on my pay for performance system. Now that doesn't usually happen in organizations. Usually they do it once a year, but organizations can do it differently if they choose to. Most don't, though. A variable interval schedule is kind of like a pop quiz or a surprise drug test. It's variable. I don't know when it's going to happen. And so teachers give pop quizzes because you have to stay on top of the material, and it forces you to stay on top of the material because you're never gonna know when the teacher's going to say, take out your pens, get ready to take this pop quiz. And the same thing with the random drug tests, as I said earlier, right? If I know that I'm going to get a random drug test, I'm less likely to engage in risky drug-seeking behaviors because I don't know when I'm going to get that drug test, and that's going to have a negative impact on me. And I had a friend who had a problem with that, where he knew he had random drug tests at his job, and he got caught, and he got lucky that they didn't fire him, but he stopped drinking and smoking pot. And he decided that he liked his job more than he liked drinking and then doing drugs or doing marijuana. And we have more flexibility now in terms of marijuana, et cetera, et cetera. But this was, 20 years ago when these were big issues, and marijuana was not legal. So it was considered illegal and it was problematic. So he stopped. And that was what they wanted. They wanted him to no longer drink and do illegal drugs, which they were illegal at the time, because that they thought that would have a negative impact on his job. And he has been sober and has not gone back to smoking pot since. A fixed ratio means for every number of things, you get a set number, you get a set reward. So for every number of widgets you make, you get a reward, or every number of items you sell, you get a particular reward. So there is a ratio of rewards that come. A variable ratio is you never know when that reward's coming. It could not be more random. And this is like slot machines. Like you can pull the slot machine, and your machine will give out a reward on this roll, but then it might wait 10 more pulls before it gives another roll, and then another 50 before it gives another reward, etc., etc. And the machine next to you will do a reward every the first three, right? The third pull, it gives you a reward. Then it might be 100 pulls before you get a reward. So it's all random. And the goal of randomness, right, or variability, is that it keeps you there because you don't know when the reward or the punishment is going to come. And because you don't know, you have to make sure that you are mindful of that. The problem is our brain thinks that we can predict random systems, and we cannot. Random systems are random systems, and our brain gets easily hijacked because we think we've got a system to overcome it, when in fact we don't. So just food for thought if you get into more in-depth decision-making conversations. This is some more advanced decision-making theories that basically say our brains can easily be hijacked because we are always looking to predict outcomes and reinforcement schedules. The last theory we're going to talk about is goal setting theory, which basically is set up in such a way that we have to recognize when the company has a set of goals it wants us to achieve, it has to be a collaborative effort, right? Certain goals require higher levels of motivation and performance to be able to accomplish. And so our goal, of course, is to make sure that we have set up a reward system that will help to get people to do the things we want them to do. So the goals are a way of kind of reinforcing those things, right? So if I set a goal, it reinforces you because now you know you need to do it in order to get the reward. It's kind of it's a reinforcement system, right? So our goals need to be specific, measurable, attainable. Your textbook says aggressive, which basically means it needs to push us a little bit, right? I like attainable because it means it pushes us, but it doesn't push us to the point where we can't do it. We don't want people to get discouraged, right? It needs to be within reach, but it needs to push them a little bit, relevant and time bound. And the attainable, as I said, is as I have it sort of set out there, whether you call it attainable or aggressive, it doesn't matter. It's getting at the same concept, which is I have to feel like I can do it. And you want to push me because pushing me to do something that's a little hard, it can be challenging, but that's where the learning opportunity comes from, right? The learning opportunity comes from when I'm pushing really hard and I'm not sure I can do it, and then when I accomplish it, it rewards me, it gets me excited, and I want to continue to do it in the future. The relationship between something that is attainable and time-bound, these two things kind of work hand in hand, because if you give me a goal and you tell me I have a week to accomplish it, that might make it not so attainable. But if I have a year to do it, that might make it more attainable. So they kind of have an inverse relationship with each other. The more attainable it is, the more manageable it is for me to get it done based on a time constraint. So the time constraint dictates how attainable something is in that context. But goal setting is a big part of what managers need to do with their employees, and that creates motivation, that creates reinforcement of certain behaviors, because we want them to feel like they can accomplish what they set out to accomplish and will get rewarded for it.